Hello and welcome to this video on Romeo and Juliet and the top 10 quotes. Some tips on how to use this video first of all, because there is a lot of information in the video. First of all, make sure you use the pause button and make the notes at your own pace. There is a lot of information on these 10 quotations. You may not want to watch all of the video at once in one go. Make sure you just pick out the key information from the notes. Do not copy everything down word for word from the screen. Read the information, listen to what I say, and then pick out the information that you understand and write it down in your own version, whether that be bullet points, whether that be keywords, however you want to write it down. But don't simply copy it, because that won't help you learn it or revise it. You may then afterwards want to do some quote explosions. So what can you remember? Get a blank copy of the quotation and explode it. What can you remember? And then a further way of revising is to take those ideas and practice writing a developed paragraph analysing the quotations. The 5 key themes that are covered in this video, and there is a link in the top corner to the video that covers the themes in the play, are death, fate, love, conflict and family. But I've also included reference to religion, and there is also a further link to the context video which covers ideas of religion in the context of the play. Quotation number 10 comes from the prologue and covers the themes of death, fate and love. The quotation is, "A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life." So first of all, we can look at the fact that the quotation is taken from the prologue, and the prologue is a 14-lined perfect sonnet. It has alternate rhyme scheme, it has iambic pentameter, and it has a rhyming couplet at the end. So the fact that we have a sonnet and the content of the prologue, all this reinforces the idea that Romeo and Juliet's emotions are not of lust but of love, but also that their love is doomed. And then looking closely at the phrases in the quotation, to zoom in at the language, we have the phrase star-crossed. This is an adjective phrase, and the adjectives star-crossed that describe the lovers, this implies that they're doomed from birth. The line just before, from forth the fatal loins, loins being the genitals of the parents, so if they were fatal, they're doomed from birth. And it reinforces this idea that the Elizabethans believe that the stars control the fate, that your future is mapped out before you. So they're star-crossed. They were meant to be together. Fate had it destined that they were going to meet as lovers. Now, looking at crossed a little bit more carefully, this could be ambiguous. This could have different meanings. Crossed could be a crucifixion. Are Romeo and Juliet a sacrifice? Do they have to sacrifice themselves for peace? Because that's what comes out at the end, because of their death. Or are their paths crossed by fate? Or are they crossed as in being cross because of the family feud? Lots of different ideas there that you can look at as in crossed lovers. Okay, and then we've got the fact that they take their life. Obviously this is referencing that they commit suicide at the end. Don't forget that the play is set within Catholic families, and Catholic sin, suicide, is considered to be punished by damnation. In other words, the Catholics believe you would go to hell if you committed suicide. However, you've got to look at the verb take. Can we look at that verb a little bit more interestingly? It could imply that they remove themselves out of their parents' control, that they take themselves away from their parents' lives because they don't want to be under that control of family duty anymore. Do they remove themselves from Earth because they can't be together anymore there? But also, you could look at it as their suicide is also used to punish their families. Look at the reaction of Juliet's family when they think she's died, when they think she's first of all killed herself. And it's only through that they learn the lesson of personal responsibility. And that crops up in that video that I've referenced earlier. Okay, and just looking a little bit more carefully at the prologue as a whole that line comes from, it's in iambic pentameter, 5 stressed and unstressed syllables, 5 dudums, and that runs throughout the prologue, and that gives this sense of inevitability, this regular expectation of death, and that juxtaposes this idea of lovers and how everything's just magical, that it's almost this idea that death is chasing them throughout the play, almost like it's got this footsteps or heartbeat constantly behind them all the way throughout them. They don't know that. They just think they're on this journey of love. But we know, the audience know, because we've read the prologue or heard the prologue, that death is constantly behind them. Quotation number 9 comes from Act 1, Scene 1 and is spoken by Romeo and covers the themes of conflict and love. O brawling love, O loving hate, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health. So looking first of all, we have some very clear oxymorons. We have brawling and loving, and love and hate. And he uses lots of these. I've just picked out a few. And we've got very over-the-top, frequent oxymorons. And these create this exaggerated, over-the-top emotions of Romeo towards Rosaline. They suggest that he's very immature and very illogical in how he feels about Rosaline. He can't figure out how he feels because he's got lots of contrasting feelings. Is he brawling or is he loving? Is he love or is it hate? It suggests that he and Rosaline just aren't compatible because the nature of the phrases, that they're complete opposites, that she doesn't reciprocate his feelings, and that he's very immature in the way that he reacts towards it. He's then got these "oh" in front of it, a phrase that is used quite frequently, but it's called an exclamation, is that phrase, this "oh." And it's this kind of excess of emotions. It's this great sort of over-the-top phrase, and it almost suggests that he's been a little bit artificial in how he feels for Rosaline. He's been a bit fake about it. And then basically what Shakespeare is doing, the authorial intent, is he's preparing us for Juliet. He's preparing us to contrast these feelings that Romeo has for Rosaline against Juliet. So if we didn't have this description of what Romeo feels for Rosaline, would we actually believe what Romeo feels for Juliet when he meets her in Act 1, Scene 5? So we've got these real cliches of a Petrarchan lover, a typical Elizabethan lover, when he's speaking about Rosaline. Lots of really kind of naff, cliched, overused phrases, which he doesn't necessarily use when he speaks to Juliet in Act 1, Scene 5. Okay, because he wants us, Shakespeare wants us to compare the two so that we believe and we really, really do invest in Romeo's feelings for Juliet. So we are convinced that that is a true love between the two lovers. And then just really zooming in on this brawling love. Is Romeo referring to Rosaline here? A little bit of a question I'm throwing at you. He's been interrupted by the public disorder. Think about where this quotation comes from. We've just had the public fight in the square. Benvolio has been asked by his parents to find out where Romeo is because he's not been at the fight. They're worried they've not seen him. He's been wandering amongst the sycamore. Benvolio comes to find him, and he's been wondering about Rosaline. He's been moping around, talking about his love, and he's been interrupted by the discussion of this fight. And what he's trying to get us to think about is that the love could be the family love that creates such loyalty, which then leads to conflict by those who don't share it. This brawling means a noisy, flowing conflict. It's not just isolated to close family members, but widespread across the city. So brawling love. Is he actually talking about Rosaline, or is Shakespeare getting us to think actually about the feud and family honour that has just happened before this scene? A little alternative interpretation there for you to think about. And then we have at the end, sick health. All these oxymorons carry on throughout this quotation. And what you've got to think about is that love is universal. We all understand to some extent what love feels like. We might have different interpretations, different experiences of it, but the audience who are watching this play in Shakespeare's time will all have felt to some extent what Romeo feels like. And then his oxymoron, sick health, conveys what his symptoms are, what he feels about love. And to Romeo, he's in love, but it's overwhelming and it's confusing. How can you be healthy but sick? So the audience are going to sympathise with him. He's a young man. He's inexperienced. He's naive. Look at him. He's in love, but it's hurting him. So Shakespeare is trying to get the audience, us, to get on board and to sympathise and to emotionally attach with Romeo, so that then when we see him fall in love with Juliet, it makes us feel emotionally attached again and invested with Romeo in the play. And then, of course, when the tragedy happens, it's even more tragic because of how we feel towards him. Quotation number 8 is taken from Act 1, Scene 2, and is spoken by Lord Capulet to Paris when they are speaking about Juliet and the proposed marriage. And Lord Capulet says, "She's the hopeful lady of my earth." So first of all, just thinking about this scene, it begins with Lord Capulet appearing to be a concerned parent. Juliet's value to Lord Capulet is being explored, and it seems to demonstrate that he loves Juliet and he respects her. And there's a suggestion that he sees her as a bit of a commodity, as a bit of an object to be traded and to be won by Paris, woo her gentle Paris, get her heart. And this was a reality for many Elizabethans. So just trying to put into context this conversation that is going on between Lord Capulet and Paris. So she is, it's a declaration, she is. And it suggests that there's a lot of expectations from Lord Capulet on Juliet, almost an unreasonable focus on Juliet, that she is the hopeful lady of my earth. She's the only daughter, and that she is the only way to fulfil his hopes for the future. If she fails in any way, then that's his future ruined. They have no other daughter, they have no son. She is the hopeful lady of my earth. So almost excessive, almost forceful. There are some undertones of quite excessive control there from Lord Capulet. So whilst it seems quite genuinely loving, look for the undertones from Lord Capulet. Hopeful. Capulet literally hopes for a prosperous and powerful future. But this is an adjective. She's a hopeful lady. could apply for Juliet. She could be a positive force in his life. Ironically, she is. Not because she gets him a prosperous and powerful future, but through death she creates the peace. Not really that he's looking for, but by being committed to the earth through her death. So he doesn't really understand what he's saying here, but yes, she is the hopeful lady of his earth because she creates the peace and harmony of earth by being buried in it at the end. And the audience will see the dramatic irony here. They know that she dies, and they know that peace is created at the end because they've heard the prologue. And in Capulet's eyes, Juliet encompasses his world, not through love and affection, but in terms of patriarchal control and duty, that she must do her family duty and her dutiful honour to the Capulet family and marry who he thinks is fit and worthy of elevating that family honour. Okay, quotation number 7, Act 1, Scene 5, the Capulet Ball. Ideas about religion and the theme of love. Spoken by Romeo to Juliet. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, my lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand. So first of all, you must remember that the first words spoken between Romeo and Juliet are in a perfect sonnet. Very conventional way that Elizabethans express their love to each other. It's all part of courtly love that they exchanged sonnets. Well, the man sent the woman sonnets. The woman didn't send the sonnets back to the man. And in this sonnet between Romeo and Juliet, both Romeo and Juliet speak to each other. So unlike Romeo and Rosaline, where it's unrequited, Juliet returns the love. So the love is reciprocated, it's returned. So Shakespeare is immediately suggesting when they first speak that they complete each other. Their words complete the sonnet form. They are combined together in the sonnet. You could also suggest it's a little bit unconventional because the sonnets would only be sent by the man to the woman. The woman wouldn't return the sonnets. It would just be sent by the man. But Juliet speaks in the sonnet. Says something about Juliet, maybe. Okay, so if I profane, what does that word mean? It means to treat something with disrespect, often in a religious sense. So profanity, to use religious words disrespectfully. So Shakespeare's reminding the audience of Romeo's faith and his family honour, whilst Romeo is being sacrilegious. He's suggesting that touching Juliet with his mortal hand would be to insult something sacred. So suggesting Juliet is almost like a sacred monument. And don't forget then, he's using this religious vocabulary to woo Juliet. So also considered to be blasphemous by a context of Catholicism or a religious audience. Okay, certainly from Romeo's point of view of being a Catholic person. And his unworthiest hand, this adjective, suggests that he's elevating Juliet to something far higher than him and therefore at the same time lowering himself in order to try and flatter her. But is this therefore, rather ironically, suggesting they're not equal? Is this putting them, separating them somehow? Dramatic irony here. You know, we know that they're not meant to be together, and he here with his language is separating them. So we have, as I've said already, we've got this religious semantic field used throughout this sonnet. We've got a good example here in the quotation, and is referring to Juliet as a shrine. So she's a place of worship. But what would you create a shrine for? To worship somebody, someone holy, or or of holy qualities that was dead. So a shrine is built for someone who has died to pray to them at. So Romeo's already creating the impression that she's dead, that she's doomed. So he's also suggesting that his sin can be absolved by giving her the ability to atone his sins. So he's saying, basically, if I kiss you, that you can get rid of my sins. So that she's got some kind of holy quality. Well, does she create a miracle? Well, I suppose she does at the end, because she creates peace between the two families. So it's almost foreshadowing the end here as well. Right, and then we have the pilgrim, and of course later on we have the reference to Juliet as a saint. So by describing himself as a pilgrim, Romeo refers himself to a person who travels to holy sites. So more religious vocabulary. Shakespeare suggesting that Romeo's on a journey, a metaphorical one. Juliet is the site of his pilgrimage. So you could look at the journeys that Romeo goes on in the play. He goes to the Capulet Ball. He seeks her out in the Capulet mansion afterwards. His journey to Mantua, his journey back from Mantua. He goes on lots of physical journeys, but he also goes on a spiritual journey, an emotional journey. Okay, and Juliet is always the site of that pilgrimage. She's always the centre of that journey, the centre of the map. Quotation number 6 is also from Act 1, Scene 5, this time spoken by Juliet, and covers the themes of conflict, love and family. My only love sprung from my only hate. So the adjective only that describes the love and the hate suggests this is Juliet's first love. And it's quite tragic because it's her only love, and we know that it'll be her only love because she's about to die very soon, in a matter of days. And Shakespeare repeats the word to describe her hate, so it creates sympathy because it's her only love has been born from the one that her only hate has been forced upon her by a family. How terrible is that? And it's sprung from it. It's not arrived from it or come from it. It's sprung from it. So if you think of spring, it's got these connotations of natural, a new life, as if this love is something very natural and beautiful. And there is, of course, new life created from this relationship, but tragically from Romeo and Juliet's life. So the new life of peace created at the end. Sprung, also, if you look at it as an alternative interpretation, it's this sudden, impulsive movement. And you could look at Romeo and Juliet's relationship. Is it rash? Is it sudden? Is it impulsive? Those are some words of advice that the friar gives them and that Juliet worries about. You know, is it moving too fast? Okay, so some alternative interpretations that you could look at with that word. And then we have this juxtaposition between love and hate. Juliet's conflicting emotions. Her love for Romeo is now at war with a duty-bound honour towards a family. So if you think about the ideas about family honour from the themes video, and she's now in love with her enemy, she'll have a lot of internal conflict with her feelings. And basically Shakespeare's suggesting that there's a lot of consequences, irreversible consequences now, due to this ancient grudge, quotation from the prologue, between these two families. That the families have got a lot of, things to think about. These consequences now cannot be reversed because this love is now set in stone between Romeo and Juliet. It's not going to just go away. Quotation number 5. Act 2, Scene 6. Friar Lawrence. Themes of death and love. These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder. So, this quotation is said when Shakespeare is basically using the time that Romeo's waiting for Juliet to arrive at the wedding ceremony. She's not arrived yet at the church, and the friar is passing on some fatherly advice to Romeo and discussing the nature of his love, and this scene marks the turning point in the play. We don't actually have a wedding ceremony in the play, we just have this conversation between the friar and Romeo, and then they move on to get married, and then we start Act 3. And it marks a turning point because straight after we have Act 3, Scene 1, which includes the violent deaths of Mercutio and Tybalt. And Shakespeare, with this quotation, is readying the audience for the tragic events that are about to unfold immediately after the wedding of Romeo and Juliet. So we have violent delights and violent ends. Mirrored phrases, also called parallelism, but you may not have used that phrase in your lesson, so don't worry. But we've got violent delights and violent ends. We've got, a mirrored phrase, something similar but slightly different. So violent in one phrase and violent in the other, but we've got delights and ends. And what Shakespeare is wanting us to do is to make the link between Romeo and Juliet's marriage and their deaths, and that it's inevitable, that it's not going to be escaped. And the first phrase may refer to this short-lived love, something that's delightful, but it's something that's kind of very passionate and uncontrolled. Something that's a delight is not something that's very serious. And what he's saying to us is a prophetic warning. You may have covered that in your Inspector Calls lessons, that this intense love, not moderate love, as was his advice, will have these dire consequences, these violent ends. So if you go for something that is delightful, something that's passionate, something that's uncontrolled, you have to be ready for something that is consequential from it, a violent end. Which we then have a simile, like fire and powder. An explosive, a premature death. The climax of their peak of their love, it'll be sudden, it'll be spectacular, fireworks, gunpowder. It implies a very destructive end to their love. But if you think about the gunpowder reference, it's not just going to affect them. It's going to have this far-reaching area of impact. And it does, doesn't it? It affects everybody. It affects everybody in Verona. And this quote is said during their wedding scene. So even during their wedding, the lovers cannot escape the conflict that surrounds them. It's there. It's always present. Cannot escape them. The conflict is always there. Quotation number 4. Act 3, Scene 1. Romeo. Themes of death and fate. Oh, I am fortune's fool. So to put into context the quotation that we've got in front of us, oh, I am fortune's fool. Romeo's declaring that he's in the hands of fate. Fortune means fate. And what he's doing is acknowledging responsibility for killing Tybalt. He is acknowledging that he is the fool of fate. That fate has put him in his hands and it's made him kill Tybalt. But don't forget that the audience would appreciate that His actions were inevitable. Look how angry he was when Tybalt killed Mercutio, and how imperative it was that Romeo had to avenge his death, which is a bit ironic, really, considering his new family allegiance. If you look at the the conversation that he had with Tybalt earlier, I love your name as dearly as my own, and then look at what he's ended up doing, how that conversation has turned around. So think about how complex Romeo's emotions are going to be at this point. So again, we have this exclamation of joy or despair. Obviously this time it's going to be despair. And we've had this "oh" when we've had a different quotation, "oh, she doth teach torches to burn bright," said by Romeo at a different part in the play, in Act 1, Scene 1, where he's describing Juliet for the first time. He said this exclamation in complete joy when he described how beautiful Juliet was. Now it's said in complete despair, and it's describing the disastrous consequences for their relationship. That's what he's thinking about, caused by killing Tybalt, a member of his own family, his wife's cousin. Okay, so this simple letter, this simple "oh," has now turned from joy to despair when he used it to describe the beauty of Juliet, to now the despair of the consequences of his relationship with Juliet. Now, Fortune's Fool. It's a metaphor, and if you think about all the other references to fate that have described their relationship as being ill-fated, star-crossed lovers, it's personifying fate and fortune. If Romeo is its fool, and a fool was someone's job to entertain the monarch, the person on the throne, the queen or the king, they would have basically someone who would come in and entertain them, and they would be called their fool. Fortune, therefore, would be the king. Romeo here basically is believing that he's the joke at someone's expense, that he's being made a fool of. That is what fool means, to be laughed at someone's expense, to perform for someone to laugh at you. So a king or a queen would employ a fool that would perform, would do silly things so they could laugh at them. They would just humiliate themselves to be laughed at. That is what Romeo feels like, someone's fool. So fortune, fate, he's sat on his throne, controlling everybody's lives like a king or a queen would, and here is Romeo, their fool, doing things at their will, and is simply being laughed at, and he feels he has no control over it at all whatsoever, and feels a complete idiot. Quotation number 3, Act 3, Scene 2, said by Juliet, and the themes of fate and love. Take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine. So the quotation starts with the imperative take, which is suggesting that Julie wants to surrender Romeo to the gods up in the heavens. She doesn't want him to die, which I will come to in a moment later, but instead what she wants is she wants the night to arrive quickly so that she can elevate him up to a celestial level, up to the stars and the planets and the moons, where everyone can then see him. And then obviously it can't be a secret. They can't hide their love from the world of Verona. Just before the start of this quote, there are the words, "and when he shall die." When he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars. What Juliet's saying is she doesn't want him to die. She's not thinking about his death. She's looking forward to the night time, because Elizabethan used the phrase to die, meaning to have an orgasm. I know, shock horror. And she's being quite mature here. So she's thinking about this sexual moment between the pair of him. And she's thinking about this, moment in their relationship, being quite mature in the way that she feels about Romeo. Quite a long way away from the time in Act 1, Scene 5, where she was saying, let's not use our lips, let's use our hands to pray. Now, cut him out in little stars. The verb cut, connotations of violence, and the tragic demise is foreshadowed of the lovers. And you could say that it's the power of this love, this real passionate love, that leads to suicide. And it's reinforcing this message throughout the play that Shakespeare is saying that love, fate and death, they're just intertwined in life. They're not separate entities. They're so closely intertwined and connected together throughout the play and the lovers. Little stars. Cut him out in little stars. Alternative interpretation. Is this suggesting Juliet's innocence? Contrast with what we've just said, but is Shakespeare, not Juliet, is Shakespeare trying to remind us of how young Juliet, and therefore the tragic fate of these star-crossed lovers? Look at how in love they are, but look at what we know and the dramatic irony. Look at what she's wanting, but what we know is about to happen. And she's saying these words just before she's about to learn that her husband has killed her cousin. She's waiting for him to arrive, and she's just about to be told that her husband has killed her cousin. So this real complex emotion of love, of duty, of family. Yet she's only 13. And then the face of heaven. Heaven has a face. It's been personified. So the love between Juliet and Romeo is something macrocosmic. Macro as in big. So the love between Romeo and Juliet is something that is bigger than the universe. It's something so massive in significance. So by giving a heaven a face, it allows the physical world to see them and admire them. She wants to put it on display. She wants everyone to see it. And she's basically elevating their love up to the heavens. She's seeing it as something as divine and only worthy of a place in heaven. How ironic is that? Because really, ultimately, the only place that they can live out their love is in heaven. Quotation number 2, Act 3, Scene 3, said by Friar Lawrence, incorporating the themes of love and fate. Affliction is enamoured of thy parts, and thou art wedded to calamity. In this scene, Friar Lawrence is speaking to Romeo when Romeo has been told that he has been banished to Mantua by Prince Aeschylus, and Romeo is acting extremely emotional, and Friar Lawrence is trying to give him some advice. And the word affliction means pain or harm, and in this case it's been personified by the friar in this metaphor, in this quotation, and it's trying to emphasize that Romeo seems unable to escape bad things that keep happening to him, of course with fate, and in this case he seems unable to escape them by being banished for the killing of Tybalt. The audience of course will be reminded by the role of fate and the unfortunate events that keep befalling Romeo, because we were warned of them in the prologue. This death-marked love, this misadventured, piteous overthrows. Okay, so affliction, pain or harm, and he can't escape them because he is enamoured, he's in love with, all of Romeo's problems stem from love, because he is, after all, one of the star-crossed lovers. But affliction is enamoured of their parts. Affliction is in love with you. So pain or harm is in love with you. So harm is being personified as being in love with you. You can't escape it. It's chasing you round like you used to chase Rosaline round. And it's enamoured of their parts, suggesting a physical or sexual attraction. So it's even suggesting that pain or harm is sexually attracted to him. And thou art wedded to calamity. Disaster is personified as Romeo's bride. Fry is using this image to suggest that Romeo is married to disaster, but the audience are going to see that this literally is true, because his marriage has been marked out as doomed. The star-crossed lovers, death-marked love, and the Elizabethans who are watching the play, don't forget, they were huge believers in the fact that your future was determined by the stars. That is what they believed. Final quotation. Quotation number 1. Act 3, Scene 5. Lord Capulet. Themes of conflict, family and death. Out, you green sickness carrion. Out, you baggage, you tallow face. First of all, in this final quotation, we have the anaphora, the repetition at the beginning of the sentence of the imperative out. And this emphasises Lord Capulet's anger and contempt for Juliet, repeating this command, out. The metre, the rhythm of his sentences shortens. We've got 3 sentences there, and they get shorter. Out, you green sickness carrion. Out, you baggage, you tallow face. And basically this emphasises his anger rising, because his pride has been damaged by Juliet refusing to marry Paris, the man of his father's choice. This marriage has been arranged, and Juliet has refused, something that would not happen. You would marry the man that your father chose for you out of your family duty, and she has refused to. And his anger and his patience running out and his damaged pride has clearly been shown here. Baggage, describing her as baggage, so using a metaphor here. Juliet is now no longer his earth and his hopeful earth. She is now his baggage, a burden to him, something that weighs him down. Baggage is also an Elizabethan slang term for a prostitute. So he's reducing her to the worst insult possible because she's rejected a marriage that would improve the status of the family. It's nothing about loving his daughter. It's about his daughter doing as he wants her to. And if she doesn't, she's just as good as a prostitute to him. Green sickness, carrion, tallow face. They're all a semantic field of sickness, almost corpse-like, suggesting Juliet is dead, certainly emotionally, to her father. Whether or not she was emotionally alive to her father in the first place is debatable. But first of all, green sickness refers to a blood disease, anemia, thought to affect unmarried women. Tallow face suggests she's got a pale complexion like a corpse. And then this is reinforced by the metaphor carrion, which is the flesh of a dead body. So is Capulet just reducing her to a corpse? Because basically she no longer serves a purpose to him. She is not willing to marry the man of his choice. What purpose does she serve? She's as good as dead to him anymore. I hope you enjoyed this video, Year 11. I hope it's been useful for your revision. I hope you can use it in a useful way to learn some quotations to reinforce your understanding of the play, the context and the themes. Make sure you subscribe so you get notifications on future videos, and here's a link to the Romeo and Juliet playlist, and don't forget to check out our other videos as well.